what type of person goes to work on Wall Street, I think you'd have to say these are people that are mostly in search of lots of money. And when they start making money, that's when the problems start. It's this endless pursuit of what they believe is going to fill them up and make them feel good, which is endless supplies of money, but it never does. So they feel this hollowness, they go out and buy things to try to fill them up. They buy Ferraris, they buy $2,000 suits, they go out for super expensive dinners, they rent houses in the Hamptons. Once they have that, then they take a, whew, I still feel empty. What do I do now? So now they look for the next step. They got to make, or only make more money, you can get even, a bigger house in the Hamptons and start flying in private jets, instant gratification. And you get caught up in this pressure on Wall Street of trying to achieve the next quarterly number, the next monthly gross minimum. So people start making decisions that are just based on making money now. It looked really great when all these big firms on Wall Street were trading these derivatives and these, issuing these credit default swaps, taking in nothing but money and being perceived as the ultimate masters of the universe while times were good. And meanwhile, everyone was just looking the other way, sacrificing any ethical or moral responsibility in the pursuit of short-term profits. And it unwinds, you see these ethical decisions, this lack of ethics in these decisions destroy everything and cause a meltdown of biblical proportions. When you sacrifice ethics, you want to backdate a trade or take a contract or something and book it to the quarter before to up your numbers. Yeah, it looks good for a while, and in the end it unravels.
What started in America last year has now spread to every part of the world.
We're down 9% today. The Xetra DAX over in Frankfurt is down by 9%. The Paris market down by 9%. Austria.
The problem is that in ethics, not just on Wall Street, in any business out there, whether it be in the insurance business like you saw with AIG, or in GM where they're making mistakes and then bankrupting that company, what happens is a lot of decisions that are ethical sometimes aren't great for short-term profits. And I guess the question is why, what makes it, listen, look at me. I went down to Wall Street, I come from a great family. My mother was one of the most well-respected attorneys in New York State, the oldest woman to pass the bar. My brother's one of the top healthcare attorneys in the United States, a partner at a big firm, okay? My dad never broke the law in his life and a CPA, and then there's me, who ended up going to jail for securities fraud and money laundering. What happened to me, that when I went down to Wall Street, I lost my path? Well, part of it, okay, was bad luck. The people that I met some people that were crooks. They showed me the dark side of Wall Street, the underbelly, and I went with that direction. That's not an excuse, though. That's just sort of a, what you'd call a trigger, okay, catalyst, okay? What happened with me was deep down was my desire for instant gratification. I wanted money now. And there's no better place to get that on Wall Street. No one goes down to Wall Street and loses their soul on day one. I'm sure people like John Thane, who spent $1.2 million on his office furniture while Merrill Lynch was bleeding more red ink than a hemophiliac with a gunshot wound. I don't think he started off that way. He's probably a good guy, very legitimate, but he got completely numb to what is normal in the rest of society. There's a certain sense of entitlement, a sense of power, where you just think that you're above it all. Okay, I'm John Thane, I'm the head of Merrill Lynch, and what the hell's wrong with me spending $1.2 million? But the truth is John Thane didn't build Merrill Lynch, and the guys that took private jets to Washington, D.C. didn't build General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. They're high-paid stewards of other people's work. They came in after the fact, stood on the shoulders of geniuses, and then milked it for all they were worth. That's the problem, is the people that are running these corporations and these brokerage firms, they didn't build them. They were built by the Carnegies and the Schwabs and all the people way back in the day. I mean, whatever names are, the J.P. Morgans, you can keep going on and on with that. But these people came in after. Their own money's not at risk. There's no pride of ownership. They have nothing at stake. So that, moral responsibility, it falls by the wayside. There are two types of people on Wall Street now, operators right now. And I think you need to separate out a guy like Bernie Madoff from the rest of the people. There's a class of people like Bernie Madoff who are out and out thieves. Bernie Madoff did not run a legitimate game. He was just simply taking people's money and stealing it. Okay, people would send him money. They thought they were investing in the stock market. Instead, he was just sending bogus confirmations out and using a basic Ponzi scheme where he was paying off new investors with old investors' money. And as long as he could keep raising more and more money, he could show them what they thought were good returns while sucking off enough money to live an extravagant lifestyle. And the only way to avoid those people, okay, is to basically do your due diligence. Okay, and be smart. Don't just give your money to the first person that calls you or anyone that calls you on the phone. Check out people's reputations. And Bernie, listen, in Bernie's case, he had a great reputation. He was a regulator, for Christ's sake. He was the head of NASDAQ for a while, which is a joke. But the telltale signs were there. It was too good to be true. The returns were above what they should have been. If anything on Wall Street seems too good to be true, it is. There's nothing given out for free on Wall Street except for the people that run the firms. They run the casinos. You are just a gambler in their world. And when you go to the casinos, right, you look at these beautiful buildings. They weren't built by winners. They're built by losers. Okay, you can make money on Wall Street as an investor. If you have a good broker and you're playing for the long term and you're in legitimate stuff, yes, Wall Street is a great place to invest your money. So I don't think that, people overall, when this is a crisis right now, when this is all said and done, I don't believe that the answer is for people to lose faith in the financial system and to never invest with stockbrokers anymore or money managers or hedge funds, whatever people want to do. I think there is a really legitimate element out there on Wall Street that deserves the trust of America and the world for that matter. But the thing with, someone like a Madoff, it's just a fraud. Okay, the rest of Wall Street, the problem is that sliver in the firms that's illegitimate that brings the rest of it down. So Bernie Madoff was a crook. What's happening on Wall Street now, which has melted down the economy, has nothing to do with Bernie Madoff. It's a far more dangerous breed of person than Bernie Madoff that's causing these problems. There are always going to be Bernie Madoffs around. There's always going to be people that they're going to just go out there and thieves. They're common thieves, okay? And what I did was not like Bernie Madoff. Notice, I actually ran a legitimate firm, and here's why I did was so terrible, and why it's even worse than what Bernie did, and what people did at Merrill Lynch and at Lehman Brothers and at AIG. Why it's worse even is because they had legitimate businesses, and within that business there was a germ of it. There was some percentage of this business was completely fraudulent. And that's enough on Wall Street to bring down the entire system. In other words, you can't be half pregnant with ethics on Wall Street. Either you're going to operate ethically, you're going to run a legitimate firm, or you're not. You can't say, well, 95%. Listen, let me backtrack for a second. If 2 years ago someone said to you, is Merrill Lynch a legitimate firm? Oh, yeah, well, of course. Merrill Lynch is totally legitimate. They're Merrill Lynch. They manage money. They're in business for 100 years, so on and so forth, right? Well, that's true. And maybe 97% of Merrill Lynch was legitimate. However, there was 3% of Merrill Lynch, this sort of growth engine managed by a few people, not all of Merrill Lynch, that wanted nothing but to make money at all expenses. They didn't care. 10 years ago, the same division, in a different form, bankrupted Orange County. They bankrupted Orange County. People forgot about that, okay, in the 90s, and that kind of slid under the rug because it was just Orange County. It was 8 million people, no big deal, right? It wasn't America, so it kind of slid under the rug. But what you have is this portion within Merrill Lynch where they're just doing insane things, where ethics is non-existent, where greed is everything, okay? And what that does is it poisons the entire company. That's what went wrong with a company like Merrill Lynch or Lehman Brothers. They were legitimate in other ways, but Dick Fold couldn't see past his own mastery of the universe and his own just want for, he didn't want to make $100 million. He wanted to make $500 million for himself.
Lehman Brothers is in serious trouble.
Lehman Brothers stock has been plummeting along with confidence in its ability to survive.
I think at a certain point when you cross over to the dark side of the force, you just nothing is taboo anymore. You look at these guys like at Lehman Brothers, or how about Bear Stearns? When Bear Stearns was crashing and burning, what was Jimmy Kane doing? He was smoking pot and playing bridge with his friends. How could he justify that? But I don't think he got there overnight. If like the Jimmy Kane that probably went down to Wall Street early on, or the Jimmy Kane of 30 years before that, would have probably been there with his shirt sleeve rolled up on the trading desk doing anything he could, okay, to try to save things. How did Dick Fold do what he did? From Lehman Brothers, the same thing. Robert Rubin, look at this. Robert Rubin was the former Treasury Secretary, right? He becomes Treasury Secretary. He lobbies to have the limits eased on derivatives, which allows firms to buy these derivatives and leverage them up. He's instrumental in getting these derivatives approved to be traded on Wall Street in a very aggressive way, okay? Then what does he do? He's no longer Treasury Secretary. He's out of office. He goes down to Wall Street, gets on the board of Citibank, convinces them to plunge headfirst into these derivatives, the ones that he deregulated when he was Treasury Secretary, and he makes $500 million by most accounts, somewhere around $500 million, and he bankrupts what was once the largest bank in the world. He goes from being a politician, changing the law, then going back to Wall Street, with his old cronies. He used to be at Goldman Sachs. He goes from Goldman Sachs to the Treasury. Then he eases the laws, so everyone on Wall Street makes a fortune while he's Treasury Secretary. Then he goes back to Wall Street, takes over Citibank, goes on the board, and blows up Citibank and walks away, and he's not indicted yet. Does something seem wrong with that? There's something fundamentally wrong with that in my book. So let me go back to my story. I had a firm. When I was very young, I went down to Wall Street, and I was a cold caller. I did really, really well. I was the top cold caller of my firm. I became the top stockbroker of my firm. I would say good luck or bad luck, because my first day as a stockbroker, the market crashed. It was 1987, October 17, 1987, and the stock market crashed, and my firm, LF Rothschild, which was a great firm in business for many, many years, went out of business. 6 months I was commuting down to Wall Street. It was costing me $100, $120 to get down there on the Long Island Railroad, the bus, and the subway, and I was only getting paid $99 a week. So I was losing $30 a week to train to be a stockbroker, and I watched all these young kids making a fortune in the bull market of the 80s, and when it was my turn, the market crashed the first day, and I was out of a job. I picked up the newspaper looking for help wanted. I was looking for anything but Wall Street. I would have sold plumbing supplies. It didn't matter. I just wanted to sell something, and I stumbled upon an ad for a brokerage firm in Long Island. I answered the ad, and it turned out to be selling penny stocks. I didn't even know what a penny stock was. I was trained in New York Stock Exchange stocks. To cut to the chase, I ended up going to this penny stock firm, becoming the largest, the most successful broker at this firm. Well, these people were also at the penny stock firm were selling, 20-cent stocks to mailmen and people that were teachers, people that really couldn't afford to invest in the market anyway. Ultimately, at that point in time is when I sacrificed my ethics, because what I saw, it was wrong. It wasn't, I saw everyone was losing money. The clients were getting killed. But I was 24 and I was so broke at that time that I just desperate. I was getting evicted from my apartment and I needed to make money. And that's how the problem started. I decided to open up my own firm, and I came up with this little niche where I decided to try to sell, $4 and $5 stocks to the richest people in America. No one had really tried that before in an organized way, and it worked unbelievably well. And what I did is I used a two-call system. At first, I would sell them Eastman Kodak, so they, brand recognition. They knew Kodak. Once they opened up an account with my firm, the second trade was into a $5 stock, and the amount of money we were making was staggering. I went from rags to making $50 million a year when I was 26, 27 years old, and I was just living this insane life. And it was basically this boardroom I had in Long Island, which was 1,000 kids, all under the age of 25 years old. It became like the sort of the amalgam of the 7 deadly sins all wrapped up into one. Okay, it was Wall Street on Long Island. It was complete insanity. There was drugs going around the office like Pez out of a Pez dispenser. There was hookers in the basement turning tricks to service the needs and wants and desires of all the crazy stockbrokers. Within the 4 walls of the boardroom on Friday afternoons, we had midget tossing competitions, cracking champagne, people were getting their heads shaved. It became like the Roman circus. It just spiraled out of control and became a self-contained universe. It was disgusting, yet it happens. How does that happen to a guy like me from a good family? Step by step, incrementally. You take one step over the line in morality, and you take it back, and then you do things right, and then all of a sudden you take another step over the line, and before you know it, you're stepping so far over the line that it just seems okay. It's like you put your toe in the bathtub, it's piping hot, and you pull it out. You put it back in again, it's not quite as hot. 5 minutes later, you're submerged under the bathtub and the water feels perfect. That was the story of my life. And, I had some gifts that I was born with. I was born with the ability to stand before a crowd and speak, and I used that in an evil way to manipulate young stockbrokers. They would come to me and I would sell them a bill of goods and say, this is what you're gonna do. You gotta sit this way, act this way, say this at this time, and so on and so forth. And you gotta buy the nicest car, eat the nicest restaurant, and greed is good. And it's about making money, and money is a wonderful thing, and you can take care of your parents with money, and it's your obligation. You owe it to this one and that one, and blah, blah, blah. I go on, day in and day out, twice a day for years straight. And it was sort of like this cult-like environment developed, and the kids loved it. Everyone loved it. But deep down at the root of it was evil, okay? However, the business itself was legitimate. It was a regular broker recommending stocks and whatnot. They weren't, scam stocks. They were legitimate stocks. However, at the root of it, there was 10% of my business that was completely illegal, and I was manipulating their wishes. And that was making a lot of money doing that. And that 10% destroyed everything else. What leads to that sort of decadent behavior? And I guess I would say, without getting too religious here, the devil's tempting. Okay, and he's always there. And whether you're religious or not, just how you want to view the devil, all those things. I would be lying. Even right now, listen, I'm sober now for 12 years. Okay, back in the day when I was doing all that, I was addicted to massive quantities of drugs. I was doing each day enough drugs to sedate a family of grizzly bears every single day. Quaaludes, cocaine, ecstasy, marijuana, the list goes on and on and on. 10 different prescription drugs. Anyway, most of the people that work for me were also on drugs. So when people are using drugs, they tend to do wacky things. But even without those drugs, what happens is a lot of those things, listen, you tell a 22-year-old kid, here's the deal. You're going to come work for me, okay? I'm going to teach you to make $1 million a year despite the fact that you don't have a college degree. I'm going to show you the best suits to buy. I'm going to show you how to lease a Ferrari or buy one for Cali. I'm going to give you all the connections. I'm going to have the best prostitutes, beautiful girls, mostly college girls, and struggling models who need more designer clothing. And then at nighttime, you're going to go into the city and drink Cristal champagne, and you're going to drive around in limousines and be the toast of the town and get into all the clubs and get the best seats. You're going to have the life. That's pretty tempting to any 20-year-old kid, any 50-year-old man. It's tempting, okay? And you know what? Now, I've had some pretty good runs later on after this whole thing happened, and I wrote a book and it became a bestseller, The Wolf of Wall Street, and I sold the movie rights, and Leonardo DiCaprio is going to play me in a movie, directed by Marty Scorsese, all this big stuff. People are like, oh my God, you're the best writer. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, no. I'm nothing special. I lived a life. I told her, you learn to, when people tell you all these great and wonderful things about you, no one's so great and wonderful, okay? And, you're only as good as the last thing that you did. And I allowed, what corrupted me was all these accolades. And, it's very intoxicating. And I, like most people that go down to Wall Street in pursuit of money, when I got the money, the only thing that happened to the hole I had was it grew larger. And with each million I made, the hole grew larger. So I tried to do more obscene things to fill that hole. If I only buy a bigger house, then I'll buy a big mansion with 20 servants. I'm going to buy a yacht, 160 feet. I go buy the yacht. You know what? I really want to have a helicopter on the yacht, but it would be really great if I could put a plane on the yacht too. Let me go put the yacht back in the yard, extend it 10 feet, so I can then put a seaplane on it, so I can take the seaplane and go diving on my seaplane and go shoot lobsters with a spear in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Then I'll feel good about myself. But then I did that, and that didn't do the difference. I was like, oh, well, this yacht, I don't know, it's really not that good. So I went and drove it into a hurricane in a storm, and I sunk the yacht and almost died with my family because I was, the insanity goes on and on and on, and there's just no end to it. It is really easy to lose your way, okay? It's a lot of good people. It's not just the bad people that lose their way. Good people lose their way too. But what I tell them is, remember, look at my life, because frankly, I had it all. I was on the top of Wall Street, flying around in private jets and doing the whole thing with mansions and servants. And not only did I lose all my money, but I ended up in an ice-cold jail cell, okay? And I was on Con Air, flying above America in shackles, okay? Sometimes scared to go into the shower because Bubba might come and get you. And you know what I was doing when I was in those places? I was closing my eyes and envisioning the faces of my two children, who back then were 11 and 9, and I have tears in my eyes, how I let them down, what kind of example, the embarrassment their father must have caused them. And, I said, when you're out there, you'll remember, tomorrow comes. Remember me in that jail cell, and think, you really want to backdate the order of the contract? You really want to artificially inflate the number? Next time you're wondering whether or not you should make the extra $2 million, think of me. Is it possible to redeem yourself? The answer is yes, okay? You could look at examples like Michael Milken, okay, and say, how did a guy like Michael Milken redeem himself? And I guess, it's easy to say, well, Michael Milken was still, unlike me, Michael Milken was left with a lot of money. So he had $500 million to spread around to charities and whatnot to essentially buy his way back into the good graces of society. However, that being said, Michael Milken also does a lot of great things and deserves to be in the good graces of society because he happens to be a great man, okay? And he's an example of a guy who 98% of what he did was legitimate and maybe 2% was illegitimate. And if you think every person on Wall Street back in the day wasn't doing exactly what Michael Milken was doing, you're wrong. They was going on hook, line, and sinker all over Wall Street. And as we see now, it went all to the highest levels of power, to the biggest firms. They were all engaged in the same shenanigans. Michael Milken's problem was he just became too big, too fast, stepped on too many toes, and what he did was he basically unlocked the power of the average American. I'm talking a guy that wasn't in the old boy WASP network. He gave basically Jews the key to the executive washroom. He allowed people like Nelson Peltz and Ronald Perlman and all these corporate, Carl Icahn. He created these guys, gave them war chests of cash to go in and raid America's oldest and most venerable corporations, and he just sent shockwaves through the channels of power of the United States. And they went after him. Was he doing things wrong? Yes, he was doing some things wrong. Any worse than anyone else? No. Does it make his right? No. Okay, did he deserve to go to jail? Yeah, maybe so. I guess they all did. Okay, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, Michael Milken's a good man. He does great things. He made a mistake. He served his time, and that's that. So you can redeem yourself. I'm trying. It's not easy. And I guess also, if you would have said, 15 years ago, did Michael Milken redeem himself? Maybe not. No, it takes time. He's been out there a lot longer than I have. He's doing a lot of good things. So I think we all can over time. And, some people will never forgive me. There's certain people that clearly need to be brought to justice. The people that really did things that were egregious and, that were the chief culprits of this whole thing. But let's just talk about the blame from the bottom up. From the homeowners that bought homes they couldn't afford, taking out risky mortgages, and some didn't understand them, but most, I'm guessing, did. From the mortgage brokers that rammed these mortgages down their throat and taught these people how to lie in their applications, to the people that worked at the banks underwriting these loans that allowed these loans to be pushed through, to the appraisers that inflated the appraisals or simply looked the other way and, edged them up 10% here, 5% here. And then you could take that to the people on Wall Street who packaged up these loans into these, into these pools, these mortgage-backed securities, to the people at the rating agencies that stamped them AAA or AA or credit-worthy, knowing that they weren't simply because they were making money doing it, to the people at the Federal Reserve that kept interest rates too low because they want to look good for the current president because voters don't want the economy to slow down, to the very president himself, to Bill Clinton back in the day who encouraged Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to lend money, that every person in America should own a home, which is a ridiculous goal, all the way down to the biggest crook at AIG who went and took in all his insurance premiums. Great game. Let's just take in all the premiums and not worry about paying people off when they default. I believe I really do know what to do, and the answer is you got to let it go. The banks that screwed up have got to go bankrupt, okay? The people that own the stocks and the bonds of these banks, they should lose all their money because they're worthless. The depositors should be protected. You put your money in a bank, you should keep your money. I believe that. But everyone else, the equity and the debt of these banks, people, even the derivative contracts on the other side, they should be wiped out. If AIG can't afford the insurance on these companies, why are we paying people that bank on insurance from a bank? Forget it. They screwed up. You're not going to get your insurance policy. It's not the government's responsibility to bail out the world. That's not capitalism. In capitalism, there are winners and there are losers. My question is this. The people that are going to get bailed out, would they have given us extra money if they would have made out on the investments? They risked and they lost. And when you risk and you lose in capitalism, that's it. You lose your money. It's not like do-over. Sorry, now we're going to give you another shot. We're going to give you more money again. Problem is with America is that you can't just consume and not produce. And we became a nation of consumers rather than producers. And we allowed the Chinese to make everything that we bought with money we borrowed from them, leveraged out 40-1. And that's how we are where we are, okay? Can America spend their way out of this recession or whatever it might turn out to be, even a severe recession, let's call it, okay? The answer is the last thing America's doing now is go out and borrow more. That's insanity. That's the definition of insanity, to do the same thing again and again and expect a different result. Right now, Americans are saving more, and they should be saving more. And the economy should be contracting. And if there's too many retail stores, then the retail stores should be closing down because you can't feed a nation of gloms, of consumers. We have to produce too. There's got to be a balance, and that's why China's got all the money right now because they got how many billion people making stuff, and we're just buying it. So what's going to happen is we're going to sink lower and lower for years and years, and we're going to have these zombie banks, which you read about in the papers, means banks that really aren't banks. They're just they're just little shadows of the government, okay? And productivity is going to be edge lower and lower. We're going to have huge inflation. Eventually, not now, but eventually it's going to be rampant inflation from all the money that's being printed, and all because they won't let these companies fail. The banks that screw up have got to fail. AIG's got to go out of business, and there's going to be casualties, yes, But without that, at least that way, there'll be some really bad times for a few years, and then the United States will recover and become stronger than ever. If we do it this way, it could be 20 years of absolute misery of just watching things sink lower and lower and lower and lower until the country is a second-rate nation, and that financially speaking. And meanwhile, America's got the smartest, most industrious, most ingenious workers. Okay, and it would just be a shame if the Obama administration and the people in it, like the Geithners of the world and the Bernanke heads of the world, and these are I'm sure they're well-intentioned men. I really believe that. I don't think they're evil. Okay, but sometimes you got to have a little balls and say, you know what? You can't go out and live the way America lived for all these years and just to live on borrowed money, leveraged 40-1, and think there's going to be no consequences in the end. There's going to be tough times because there should be tough times because people screwed up. Okay, and there's got to be a massive correction. But if you allow that correction to occur, if you take the dose of medicine, when all of it shakes out, there's going to be a lot of unemployment, there'll be a lot of pain, and when it's over, it's going to be like a breath of fresh air, and the country is going to take one spark, something's going to happen, and we're going to go on a sustained growth recovery, and that my children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy. Without that, I fear for everything.